So, an interesting situation has developed with the actress Emma Watson. She recently appeared in a photo shoot for Vanity Fair magazine, and in the photo shoot, it was somewhat suggestive. She was topless, but there was material. Don't know what you would call it, but it was a material that was more or less covering her nipples, but otherwise it was pretty suggestive. You could see the curvature of her breasts, if I could put it that way. Um, I didn't think it was a particularly attractive shot simply because I wasn't, you know, the hairstyle didn't really do it for me. Well, I thought that was a bit of a weird hairstyle, but that's beside the point. The point was that it was clearly meant to be a sexy shot. Now, I don't think Emma Watson would honestly deny that. Well, there's been an interesting backlash from both critics of feminism and other feminists. Um, I'll start with the other feminists. I guess from what they are saying is that she's a sellout, she's not a real feminist because she's shown herself in this way, and their whole cause celebre is about objectification of women. That's one of the biggest sort of campaign pieces that Western feminists have adopted in recent years. Um, and from the point of view of many critics of feminism, particularly men, it's hypocrisy because feminists spend a lot of their time shaming men over looking at the female form. Um, and so, what she, as one of the country's best known feminists, is now doing is, putting herself up for that. And it is rank hypocrisy. Um, so, what I think this is interesting. Firstly, I have very little sympathy with her because she's playing the victim both ways. Now, to be fair to Emma Watson, as feminists go, she is one of the more moderate and tolerant feminist. She doesn't get in people's faces, and she's not the UN speech. In my opinion, it was a sort of polite front of feminism. I still believe that Western feminism is a divisive, dishonest, and deeply hypocritical movement. But Emma Watson herself, I don't dislike her. As feminists go, I think there's far, far worse feminists out there. But this is quite revealing, and I wonder, is it going to make her start to wonder what she's tied herself into by so publicly saying that she's a feminist. Now, I suppose you could look at it from a point of view that she is kind of re-owning feminism. I don't know, from the more extreme factions, and I suppose that is a good thing. But she's not the first woman to make an issue out of male objectification and then pose for glamour shoots. The actress Gemma Chan was one of those who signed a petition to ban paid free in the sun. She's posed for glamour shoots. I'm not saying like outright, um, overly sexualized shoots, but certainly glamour shoots, certainly shoots where she's a model by profession. Um, and there's many other examples. I just cannot stand that hypocrisy of women who call themselves feminists and then pose in these shoots. And then I have no doubt if there was a campaign to, ban, say, well, there was, in fact, the beach body ads in the London Underground. It just seems to me that feminists say it's okay for us to do it, but if any other woman does it, oh, then she's being controlled by men, she's selling out. So what we have here is a classic case of internal feminist intolerance. They're telling Emma Watson she can't do it. She's no right to call herself a feminist. Um, I'm mildly amused by it. Excuse me, up there. I'm mildly amused by it because it just shows how pathetic this movement has become. It's intolerant against itself. I mean, this is not a broad church. It is a very intolerant movement. It basically, so that's what it does. It kind of shuns a more moderate feminist like Emma Watson, and she is more moderate because, like I say, she doesn't get in people's faces. She doesn't. I don't agree with a lot of the things she says, but I don't think she's an extremist. And I hope this experience will make her just think things through. It's not for me to tell her if she wants to call herself a feminist, that's her business. But apparently, and I don't know if this is true, I have to emphasize this was a rumor, might be completely baseless, but apparently she had got to a point where she was finding it hard to get out of bed because she feared the stigmatization from fellow feminists over her more moderate stances on things. Um, in the interview for Beauty and the Beast, she was quite indignant about it, and she said, "Oh, I'm not a feminist because I show my tits." Well, the thing is, what you need to understand, Emma Watson, is so many of your fellow feminists, maybe not you personally, but so many of your fellow feminists spend all their time shaming men. So, as a feminist, if you're going to defend your position in doing this, then you should come out and say, let's stop shaming men. Because she knew full well that men would be looking at that shoe, right? She knew full well that something like that is going to end up on the internet. So, I really don't have much time for, on one hand, saying that if men look at attractive women, if they appreciate the female form, then it's objectification. Oh, by the way, it's only in certain contexts because if it's an artistic sort of setting or if it's more high class, that's fine because that kind of fits into the metropolitan establishment that so many feminists align with. Um, but if it's frankly the Sun, which by the way I'm not a fan of, I grit my teeth having to say this, but let's face it, the Sun is marketed at working class Britain or a large part of it. So, if it's White Van Man looking at a topless girl on page three, then he's a pig. He's objectifying her. To hell with him. But if it's an artistic type in a London gallery, that's fine because that's art. So if you're against objectification, then you're against all objectification. Then you're against all depictions of the female body. There is male objectification too, incidentally. No one cares about that. You get plenty of men's magazines showing off the male physique all the time. You get, footballers and boxers and male athletes showing off what the ideal male physique is supposed to be. Now, does that not put pressure on young men to try and get a six pack and all the rest of it? But the difference is, unlike feminists, most blokes aren't going to go around and saying, "Oh, I'm being victimized. These athletes are telling me what to do." Strong independent people think for themselves. They don't blame some external factor. So I'm somewhere between kind of amused by it, but also to me it just demonstrates the utter hypocrisy that is inherent in modern day feminism. This is not about equality. This is just about trying to find reasons to be offended. I believe objectification is a way of basically censoring the male mind. Now, there's a world of difference between a man being attracted to the female form, which is absolutely any heterosexual man that says he isn't is a liar. Um, and men being lecturers, and that's a totally different matter. I'm not talking about harassment or anything like that. But if you have a woman who's in the public eye and who chooses to, put herself out there, firstly, that's fine. I have no problem. It's not like I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of, but it's a hypocrisy I can't stand to then turn around and say, so, that's Emma Watson's position, but I think she's going to be scrutinised now, and if she ever comes out and preaches about objectification, well, she should be very careful about that because then people will throw straight back at her. Wait a second, you done this. So, she needs to be aware of that. If she ever then joins some feminist crusade against objectification, um, that's all there is to it. Um, I'm not offended by it at all, but I'm just acutely aware of the inherent hypocrisy regarding the objectification issue that lies within feminism. And it isn't just Emma Watson, like I said, there are other high profile women who preach about how awful page three is, but they have no problem appearing in glamour shoots. Now, I suppose you could argue that Page Three is supposed to be in a family newspaper. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Page Three. I don't think it is particularly appropriate in a national newspaper. But there is double standards because feminists don't care about Manet's Olympia, famous 1862 portrait. That shows a topless woman. She was actually a real model. She wasn't like some abstract Roman goddess. She was a real model. At the time, it caused huge controversy. But contemporary feminists, most of them would see it as a work of art. So there is, I think, some snobbery in the feminist movement as well, which is to say that if it is in a context as seen as artistic, classy, that's fine. But if it's like if it's another context, if it is like a glamour shoot for a men's magazine or for the Sun or in other contexts, if it's strippers in a club or whatever, then it's objectification. So, feminists have to make their mind up. If they're opposed to so-called objectification, then they should be consistent across the board. Some will say they are doing that by criticizing Emma Watson, but I just find the whole thing interesting. As for my own stance on objectification, I think it's a massively overblown term. I do appreciate that sometimes certain men can seem a bit lecturous and they can seem like when they talk about women in a certain way, it can be a bit inappropriate. I totally agree with that. Simply admiring the female form, whether you're a heterosexual man, in a consensual context, is completely. Yeah, I wish women were more honest about this. You cannot tell me that an attractive young woman, poses herself in that way and she doesn't want male attention. Please, please give me a break. Um, and then men are shamed for it. If men talk about this, if men say, "Oh, women are looking for attention," then they're accused of objectifying them or, not empowering them and so on. You see, feminists only believe in empowerment when it's on their terms. So a woman who doesn't call herself a feminist, and obviously that's not the case here, but if you had, say, a woman who explicitly did not call herself a feminist and then posed in men's magazines, feminists would immediately portray her as a victim. It's pathetic. If you really believe in women deciding for themselves, then don't tell other women what to do. It's a height of hypocrisy.